This is a lecture on a brief history of Latin America and the Cold War. This is what I did at UCSB. So bear with me for a while here as we talk about the Cold War and its impact on Latin America. First off, all right, first step, you got to know a little bit about the social triangle or the power triangle of Latin America. It's made up of three legs: the military, the church, and the elite. And smushed in the middle is the majority of the population, which is the people of Latin America. Let's explain that a little bit more in depth. It's designed from the beginning of pretty much colonization to keep those people in the middle down so they don't have rights and they can be exploited. The military side of it keeps people in check with force. This is pretty self-explanatory. You've got a picture of one of the El Salvadorian military Guardia Nacional trainees, usually trained by and equipped by the United States of America. We'll talk about that a little bit in the future here. There's an actual college that the CIA runs called the College of the Americas that trains Latin American dictators how to keep their people in line through the military. Leg two, the church. And the church back then, before like 1971 and the Medellin Conference, was there to keep people in line. Keep people in line through God. God says obey your boss, your mayor, your general, your mom, your dad, etc. You don't buck change. This is going to change in the time period we're talking about, but this is old school religion. It's hard to break that. The elites. The elites kept the people in line basically through sharecropping. The elites owned all the land. People worked the land and didn't own it. And you know this from the American South, is that this is not a way towards equality and freedom, is not owning your land. Most of the land was owned, loads of it, by the United Fruit Company, UFCO, American company. It owns a lot of that land back down there and keeps the people in a state of poverty through not really paying them for the, literally their fruit of their efforts. Keep them impoverished through quotas and stuff like that. It does not give them access to the amount of capital leaving their nation through the land. USA loves the triangle. It keeps the cost of our products low, agricultural products specifically. But later on, stuff like Honduras makes tons of T-shirts, and we get those cheap as well. So we support governments to keep the triangle going. We look the other way when those governments abuse civil rights of their citizens, just so we can get cheap goods coming our way. When you add on top of the communism and the Cold War and containment, it just gets worse. It's kind of like throwing a bunch of gasoline on a campfire. It just gets out of control. Big part of that is the domino theory. The idea that America had swallowed hook, line, and sinker, that if one country goes communist, then the next one will go, and the next one will go, and the next one will go. I'm pretty sure there's going to be pretty soon there'll be Russian tanks on Rio Grande. Doesn't recognize that all commies were not directed by Moscow. We always thought this monolithic communism that everybody takes their orders from Stalin, from Khrushchev, who was ever in charge. It's not true. Sometimes it's just that the communist is the best option for the people there, the ones standing up for the people. If you remember talking about Ho Chi Minh and stuff like that, they're the guys who have the people's backs, and we can never realize that. We can never support them just based on the fact that we hated communism so much. And it's a good way to keep the cheap stuff flowing, too. If you discredit the government for being communist, you can just keep those cheap bananas coming, and the American public will think, yeah, we're keeping communism down, but yeah, we're getting cheap stuff as well. And so the rich get richer. Resistance. There's going to be resistance to the power triangle. Eventually, this resistance comes from people like communist revolutions, who based their platforms on land redistribution or agrarian reform, giving land back to the people. We're not going to like that. And liberation theology, which is the Catholic Church trend, which we'll talk about in a second. Communist insurgencies. They cropped up in Chile, Argentina, Salvador, Nicaragua. Guatemala was the first one. Pretty simple premise. give land back to the people so they can benefit more from their labor. Makes sense. Probably a pretty American kind of concept as well. Nicaragua became the first communist state, and that scared the bejesus out of America. There's Cuba and now Nicaragua. The dominoes were starting to fall. And there's a good little video on YouTube that you can click on right there that kind of explains a little bit about what happened in Nicaragua and the Sandinistas coming to power in Nicaragua. Obviously, for the United States, that was a problem. Liberation theology is one of my favorite subjects. One of my heroes is Archbishop Oscar Romero from El Salvador. Catholic Church switches sides at this point away from the power triangle, and they adopt liberation theology, the concept that God is there for everyone, not just the rich, and that everyone has rights under God. This makes him super unpopular with a lot of Catholic Church hierarchy and the other two legs of the power triangle, the military and the elite. Puts him kind of in the crosshairs. So he becomes an advocate for the people. And also, we don't like that, as Americans don't like that as well, our government, because if we're going to teach the people that they have rights, maybe eventually they're going to question the fact that we're not paying them anything for their stuff. American response, there you got Ronald Reagan. He's probably the most famous American president when it comes to Latin America and some of the shady stuff that happened down there. USA is a huge problem because of this, because the presence of communist revolutions, the governments rubbed us the wrong way, containment-wise. Dominoes were falling. Liberation theology gave hope and power to people. We didn't want to have it. We didn't want to pay these people a wage that would, make our consumer goods more expensive. And both groups would have given land back to the people as well, which again, that our big company, United Fruit Company, would have been hurt. So in response, we tend to prop up dictators. USA, CIA specifically, props up strongmen who will fight the communists and keep the Catholic Church in line. Perón is a great example in Argentina. He's the guy that comes up first with what's the concept of desaparecidos, which we'll talk about in a little bit. He oppressed academic and liberal elements of Argentina, and we trained him to do that to keep the commies out. They fund anti-communist forces. We train and fund Guardia Nacionales, which are like the National Guard, but they're not like our National Guard, who goes and helps with storms and stuff. They patrol the countryside and keep people in line. They supply them with our weapons. We fund anti-communist insurgency like the Contras. When Nicaragua fell to the communists, when they fell to the communists, we funded the Contras, which are based in Honduras and Costa Rica, basically a private army fighting the Sandinistas. And Reagan did this through funds that he got from selling missiles to Iran and selling cocaine in Los Angeles, because he couldn't go to Congress because this is so close to the Vietnam War that we wanted to support that. So it's basically Reagan funding his own private military response to Nicaragua. And that ended up in the Iran-Contra affair, which we'll talk about later. And Oliver North is pictured there. He was the guy who kind of took the fall for it. But he's a Fox News columnist and analyst right now, so you can do pretty horrible things and still get on Fox. All right. We also supported state-sponsored assassinations. We trained death squads. These squads went around and killed off political opponents and community organizers, communists, such like that. Basically, anybody who was working against the triangle. This is where we get the concept that starts in Argentina called Los Desaparecidos. When basically Perón in Argentina, he took all the the academics and the liberals and put them in the soccer stadium. From there, they just disappeared. Basically, what he did was take them in helicopters and drop them over the tropical rainforests in Argentina. So nobody ever found him. And this is something that happens in Latin America a lot. It's a double thing, whammy. First off, you get rid of the opponent, and second off, you sow fear with the rest of the population because these people are just disappearing. Now, in El Salvador and places like that, they take it a step farther where they kill these people. Desaparecidos are killed, but then they're left out in public, like dumps and sidewalks and stuff like that. Google it, you'll see. And that kind of ups the ante on the fear where these people are just laid out for public view, abducted at night and killed. There's even the cathedral in San Salvador, they had a photo album. It was American journalists, European journalists would go around the countryside taking pictures of these dead people, and they bring them back to Salvador so they could have a record of these people. So if you lost your child, you could go to the cathedral and try to find them in this photo album of death. That's how bad it was getting. Also, the story of the U.S. nuns who were assassinated by death squads. They were based in Salvador, went to Nicaragua to pick up some friends, and came back. And were planning to come back after that, and they disappeared. Basically, the Salvadoran like excuse was that these nuns bust through the border, packing AK-47s and Uzis, and shot at the border patrol agents. And we eventually found them in shallow graves. They'd been raped and shot in the head, and the Salvadorian government tried to call them communists, and that actually got them a little bit of hot water under Kennedy or the Carter administration when they took away their aid for a while. But when Reagan came back, he reinstated it. So basically, these guys get the message that they can do whatever they want and still remain in power. And then they do execute Archbishop Romero. While he's giving mass to a bunch of nuns, and they shoot him. And that was a CIA-sponsored death squad that did that. The results: USA was able to keep communist states from Nicaragua from spreading throughout Nicaragua. Sorry, USA was able to keep communist states from spreading. Although Nicaragua, their people did reject communism through elections, not through our pressure. USA was able to keep land out of the people's hands and still in the hands of our companies. The power triangle was kept intact, keeping cheap imports coming our way. As a result, also, waves of immigrants from Latin America came north, fleeing the chaos created by the power triangle, the violence, the poverty and stuff like that. We constantly complain about those immigrants coming, yet we were the ones who basically set up the system to push them towards us. And the rise of organized crime like MS-13, like the face tattooed guy to right, also is a result of this, because the corrupt governments looked the other way when the drug cartels started to get more and more powerful and did nothing about it. So they grew and became super rich with cocaine and other drugs and human trafficking and stuff like that. And so we have our own policies kind of to thank for a rise of gangs like MS-13. Further study, when you guys get time over the break here, I would watch, although you need to get permission for your adults, because it is R-rated and gets pretty raw at times. It's Oliver Stone's Salvador. It's about a journalist who goes through El Salvador at that time. Also, more like PG-13 version. There's still death and destruction. It's not so vivid. Is Romero with Raul Julia, about the life of Archbishop Romero and his assassination as well. Some of you guys watched that last year in world history. All right, it was quick. But this is one of those subjects that we could spend a lot of time on. Maybe over the break, you get some time to go into a Google, Wikipedia binge on this. But it's some interesting stuff that really impacts us today. So thank you for listening.